And that's a perfect analogy for what happens when we suppress our truth, and we don't have the courage to be vulnerable and honest. And if you suppress yourself and you're in the pressure cooker and life starts to squeeze you.
What do you or that part, give it that identity, need in that moment for your partner to do or not to do, or to pause on, to revisit in the moment? What do you need from your partner? Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals all over the world, welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. This is episode number 19, the easiest way to avoid hurting your partner. Unfortunately, in life, I said this recently on an event I was at. I did a training recently, and I said unfulfilled people unintentionally hurt other people. And often the people closest to us. So before we jump into this episode, a huge shout out and thank you to Next Level Podcast Solutions for producing this show and many, many others all around the world, making this world a better place. Thank you. Thank you. As always, love, ladies first.
Well, to jump off what you just said, Lovey, a quote that, I don't know if you came up with it first or if I did, and then we just kind of snowballed it, but hurt people. Misaligned people, unfulfilled people, unfulfill others. And I think it's a beautiful quote that we can each take into account as we go through our lives, and specifically in this podcast, because we are going to be talking about the easiest way to avoid hurting your partner. So for our listeners, raise your hand if you've ever been in the car with a drunk driver.
I'm raising my hand for those of you who are only on audio.
I raised my hand too. Raise your hand if you ever knowingly stepped in that car knowing they were drunk.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, me too. Raise your hand now to kind of go all the way in. Did you step in that car not knowing they were drunk, but then found that out through massive risk and fear and pain even? I've experienced that. Alan's raising his hand as well. So I want to start that kind of dialogue, if you will, around how risky that is. And I don't know the numbers per se of how many lives are taken by drunk drivers each year globally, but I certainly know vehicular accidents cause more pain and more deaths than certainly airplanes, shark attacks, I don't know if smoking, but
for young people, it's the highest death rate for young individuals.
Yeah.
And I've done my research, at least in America, on that. In 2012, it was 43,000 motor vehicle accidents just in America. And it's down to 39,000 as of 2019, I believe, 2018.
Yeah. So it claims a lot of lives, and the ripple effect of that pain is quite drastic. So I want to use that analogy as we carry through this episode, because and Emilia, like, how the heck does this connect to what we're talking about? Because what we found, Alan and I, through coaching individuals around the world, is that none of us really necessarily intend to hurt our partner. None of us really want to inflict pain on others, at least the majority of us, and certainly no one that we've coached. And likewise, not a lot of people that get in the car completely intoxicated intend to kill someone in a car accident or hurt someone else, right? I would hope that, obviously people don't get in the car intoxicated, period, right? But some people unknowingly get in those situations, whether or not they're predisposed to that or not. But anyways, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. What I want to use that analogy for is that sometimes we experience scenarios with our partners where we wish we could take back something we said, thought, or did that inevitably one way or another hurt our partner. And this episode digging into how to avoid that really is harder sometimes than it looks, but the effort that can be placed by just kind of knowing the high level things that Alan and I are going to be talking about can really save your relationship so deeply. And it's these little things, these conscious mindful moments that can make your relationship significantly better than what it currently is if you bring more mindfulness to your parts and which ones are driving the car. So if you could, for this analogy, if you could think about every single day you have a car, metaphorically speaking, that you're driving, right? So when you get into work mode, right, you probably have a version of you that's a little bit different than maybe family mode, or maybe when you just want to watch Netflix, right? There's a different part of you that quote unquote might be driving the car being you in this instance. And that part of you has a distinguishable, noticeable motives, behaviors, identities, thoughts, and motivations when it comes to whatever the goal is. When in an intimate relationship, you might have a part of you that might drive you to be very loving and very kind with your partner. And then there might be instances where you guys kind of come to a stop sign and you have a conversation that might make you uncomfortable. Or there might be an experience that is a full stop, red light. You don't want to go near with a 10-foot pole. There might be a part of you that might be coming forward, and Al, I know you're going to go into those. So I think for context, to understand your parts before we dive deeper into this analogy, I think that would be really helpful to have.
So the first thing that I want to say before we jump into parts is it can take years, sometimes decades, to build a magnificent building. And it can take only one day to tear that building down, one fire, so to speak. And just like I like the analogy of the car accident, because one moment can change your entire life. I've been in tough car accidents in my life that changed my entire life, and fortunately I was okay. But the same is true for your relationship. You can crash your relationship, and it can really hurt your relationship if you're not careful. Yeah. Just like in a car, if you're not careful and you don't take it seriously. So I think that's a great analogy, first and foremost. And to further this analogy, the parts of you, we all have different parts of ourselves. So imagine you're in a car and there's 4 people in the car. There's 4 versions of you. They call these alter egos, different identities, different parts. There's a lot of science and psychology behind this. So the 4 parts that 4 archetypes of every individual that I've tried to identify in my sort of practical psychological coaching is the 4 characters in every movie. There's a guide, there's a hero or heroine, there's a villain, and there's a victim. And I think that the reason why movies, books, stories, TV shows resonate so deeply with us is because we recognize ourselves in these characters. Go ahead, sweetie.
I was just going to say, could you bring like an example to our listeners of what one movie, one story, one book, whatever, that you can show explicitly what is which archetype?
Yep. So I'll use Titanic. Titanic's one of the most successful movies ever, so hopefully you've seen it. If you have not, you got to, because it's amazing, truly a magnificent masterpiece. But so the victim in that movie is Rose Dawson, which is Kate Winslet's character. And the villain is there's a couple, Society Disempowering Women in the early 1900s, obviously. Yep. And then her mother, who has debts from her father and, is asking her to be in a marriage she doesn't want to be in. Yep. And then you've also got Cal, which is her fiance, who is an arrogant, entitled, person who has a big trust fund of his dad is a steel tycoon. And the hero is actually Kate Winslet's character once she answers the call. So Kate Winslet's character on the back of the boat, when she's about to jump off the back of the boat, the guide comes in.
Because she was the victim at the time
Yeah,
where she
exactly.
can't handle it, so she's going to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
The victim represents suppression.
Mm-hmm.
The villain, someone being suppressed. I'm sorry.
Right.
The villain
Feels
represents, helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
So the victim represents helplessness. The villain represents some form of suppression or injustice. The hero represents courage and massive action.
Yeah.
And the guide represents wisdom, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very, simple version.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's on the back of the boat and she's considering jumping off because she just doesn't see any way out of this horrible marriage. And the guide comes in. And Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Jack Dawson, is the guide who comes back to the back of the boat and says, don't do it.
Yeah.
And says, not only are you going to die, but it's actually going to be really painful.
Yeah.
I grew up in Wisconsin. I did ice fishing. I fell through the ice, that whole thing. And so, at the end of the movie, Rose's character says, he saved me in all the ways that a woman can be saved. And I think that, in that movie, Jack Dawson guides her into a new world, a new alternative where she can choose for herself the type of life that she wants to live. And she answers the call right before there's like the whole like, come with me, do this thing. And she's like, no, I can't. I got to be in this marriage. We have all these debts. And she doesn't answer the call. She says, no, I'm good. You don't have to save me.
Yeah.
And he says, this fire that I love about you, it's going to burn out. Not right away because you're strong, but it's going to burn out. Like, you need to get out of this marriage. You don't even love the guy.
Yeah.
And she eventually says, you were right. And she goes to the front of the boat, and we've all seen that scene at the front of the boat where they are kissing. Yeah, exactly. And she's like, I'm flying,
fully
Jack.
transformed.
Yeah, exactly. Fully transformed. And then after that, the villain gets insecure, and it's a whole thing after that. But anyway, so we all have these characters inside of us. Gotcha. We have the villain, the victim, the hero, and the guide inside of us. I for example, I grew up around a lot of alcohol. I ended up, doing that for a while. I made myself the villain at times when I was drunk and I was unkind.
Same.
And then I ended up becoming the hero and having the courage to quit drinking. And now I've quit drinking over 3 years, and now I feel like I can guide others on that journey. And so I think we're all transforming through these characters all the time. No one's fully perfect, and all of us have the ego and the villain inside of us. So here's the real soliloquy thesis here is if you let the villain drive with your intimate partner at the wrong time, you're going to crash the car. And you don't want to do that. And so when Emilia and I very first met, we just didn't want to screw it up. We were like, this is the best thing in the world. I just don't want to screw this up. And what we were really saying is, don't let those parts that have been suppressed or that maybe are unkind drive this time. Like, don't screw this up. No yelling, no fighting, no unkind words, no saying things you wish you didn't say, or doing and saying things you really didn't mean and you're going to regret later. We've done a really good job at protecting each other's heart, and we want to help you all do the same. So the analogy here, another analogy is the pressure cooker. So suppression is kind of like, we have this Instapot that we use. And
hashtag thanks, Beth.
Yeah, seriously. My mom got us this Instapot, best thing ever.
Best thing.
And we cook chicken in it, right? And we hit saute, and it does this 30-minute thing where the chicken's in it and there's water in there. And it's a pressure cooker, so it pressurizes. And you have to release the pressure before you open this thing up. Otherwise, it'll pop the lid off and get on everybody. And that's a perfect analogy for what happens when we suppress our truth, and we don't have the courage to be vulnerable and honest. And if you suppress yourself and you're in the pressure cooker and life starts to squeeze you, and there's another great analogy that Wayne Dyer uses. He says, you're never expecting to get apple juice out of an orange. Why? Because when you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice out. Because when life squeezes you, what comes out is what's inside. And so if we have junk inside of us, if we have suppression inside of us, and we have trauma inside of us and all these bad things, or less than ideal things, I should say, when you're under pressure, they might surface and hurt people. The image that I personally see is a dog who's swimming in muddy water, and then they get out of the muddy water, and it's like a family picnic, and it's all white linens and stuff, and the dog just shakes the mud off on everybody. And it's unintentional, but the dog is getting their mud on everybody. And I think that that's what a lot of us do in intimate relationships. And so that's kind of a long-winded version of stop unintentionally hurting your partner. Try to identify when the wrong part is driving at the wrong time. And you can go into kind of what else they can do. I think you have like a 3-step thing ready.
A little over a year and a half ago, I attended my first relationship call with Alan and Emilia. And as a single mother, I was very curious what I was actually going to be able to take away from it. I was very blown away with how deep we could actually go in that first session alone. It really opened the doors and opened my eyes to a lot of my patterning and wounding around relationships. Through attending some of their live events and through work with them, I have really grown in confidence, in learning how to love and show up for myself, which has been huge. And it's really set the bar high when in terms of standards for relationships and what I desire and need out of a relationship. They very much practice what they preach, and it's so nice to see people working consciously on relationships. Again, it's really set the bar high for what I look for and what I desire in a relationship. So I'm super grateful to be able to learn and grow from them and be a part of this community.
Yeah, and just to add one comment to what you were saying. So Alan just brought us through like a movie to connect with the different parts on, a pressure cooker, dog analogy, so many analogies and metaphor, which was really helpful, babe, because if someone hadn't seen Titanic, then they can definitely relate to one of those. So I'm grateful for the variety in there. But really, at the end of the day, the concept here is that you don't want to part driving when it can cause pain. And that's what's happening. One part of you, oftentimes when we see partners being hurt by another partner, is when there's high stress environments, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of chaos. And that's typically when the pressure valve is not released, but rather someone just opens the Instapot, if you will.
Yeah, and the lid pops off.
The lid just pops.
Knocks someone's head.
Yeah.
Or gets a concussion or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you see a lot of partners hurting each other when they didn't mean it. So why do we find ourselves in those areas? Why is it so often that partners find themselves in, well, I wish I didn't hurt. Like I didn't mean that. Okay, well, if you didn't mean it, let's rewind. Let's look at the part that was driving. Why were you so stressed out? Because what we oftentimes is that one part is typically activated when you're under a specific set of stressors. And so if you're not familiar with your own go-to stress response, whether it be fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which is putting other people's needs above yours, you can't necessarily know who's driving. Okay, so understanding the part that's driving, that is step number 1. Understand who is driving, but realistically, you got to name them. What we found in one of the exercises that we do with our clients that's really, really helpful is naming your parts, giving them an identity, because the person who's driving, if you don't know what their name is, quote unquote, and you can give them an identity that you can refer to them to, you're not going to be able to say, hey, insert partner here. This part of me is driving, and we know this part's go-to tendencies are shut down, are fight, are spill over, are pop the lid off, right? So like, for example, there was a moment after a relationship talks event that Alan and I did, and we were on this couch and we were going through a whole event debrief and experience review of like how we did and all this stuff. And I ended up getting triggered. I was under a lot of stress that I didn't actually realize I was under. And so in that moment, we were unpacking something that was really uncomfortable for me, and I didn't necessarily know why. And it's that, on top of me being stressed out, actually triggered a part of me whose name is Andy. I've given the name Andy, identifying with the character in the movie The Old Guard, if anyone's ever seen that. She's a badass, but she's a part that has been developed through massive trauma. And so she also has a name called the Killer. And her go-to identity, go-to stress response is actually to shut down in real time. So what does that look like?
To fight.
Or to fight, right? Yeah. Or really kill, like go for,
By the way, your stress response is for survival, not for thriving. I just want to make that clear. It's if you're in the woods and you see a grizzly bear, it's okay to let the survivor part drive, but don't do that in a vulnerable place with your intimate partner.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's going to be, so these parts all serve a purpose is my point.
For sure. Yeah. All serve a purpose. So in that moment, Andy was coming out, identifying the moment, what Alan and I were talking about as a moment to survive, when in reality, like everything was good. We were just chilling on the couch, unpacking things. And she realized that like this ignited a neural pathway, an experience in my head that triggered me. And so in that recognition, what was ignited was the go-to stress response, which was the first one was go to shut down, which disassociating from my body, right? That kept me able to survive, honestly, in the past. Mm-hmm. And then the backup one, if that didn't work, my backup stress response in that form was to fight and to kill. And in that moment, I had to say to Alan, because we were both really passionate. Well, you were very passionate talking about something that we were reviewing, and I was recognizing in real time that I'm actually feeling like I'm losing control for my own body. I feel like I'm disassociating, and I am so triggered right now. And I had the awareness because thankfully I named my part, which is step one. Name your part and know when it's driving, know what that looks like to you and what it feels like, to be able to communicate that with your partner. In that real time, I said, babe, I think Andy's driving. I feel really triggered right now. And I'm noticing that I'm leaving my body in this conversation. And I don't mean to, but this is what's happening. This is my experience. And we really need to take a pause on this conversation. Because what I understood about myself was if that doesn't work, then the second stress response gets activated, which could really hurt us.
I just want to make it clear here. I think another good representation for our listeners, if you've ever seen the movie Finding Nemo, Bruce is this friendly shark that is like fish, friends, not food. And then he smells the blood and he's like, oh my God. And the other sharks are like, intervention. He's like, no, I swear he's really a nice guy. It's a lot of times that's what it is. And we call this being hijacked. Someone's taking the wheel. The drunk driver's taking the wheel of the car. And I also want to clarify, love, the response to kill, again, a survival response, but you're not actually killing anything.
No.
Okay, I just want to make that clear. Not killing anyone, not killing anyone or anything. It's very important that you are clear about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. Otherwise, we might have the police.
What she means by the killer is someone who fights and for survival.
Yeah.
Fighting for survival. A fight response.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, geez, you got me scared of myself.
No, you're good.
But anyway, so in that moment, my stress response was activated. So to be able to avoid hurting my partner, Alan, in this instance, I had to recognize, name my part and know when it's driving. Okay. So for each one of you, the listeners here, you have a part of you and you know when they're driving. You're starting to probably tune into when that part is happening. And the key here is like being able to communicate that with your partner is step number 2. Express your needs. What do you or that part, give it that identity, need in that moment for your partner to do or not to do, or to pause on, to revisit in the moment? What do you need from your partner and what do you need for yourself? I think expressing your needs as clearly as you can get to yourself can help you express that to your partner.
And you said, I just need to pause.
Yeah. I need a pause on this conversation, love. And just to breathe. In that moment, I needed to breathe. And thankfully, you heard me and how serious I was in that tonality, because I was honestly afraid of that situation of what, if we didn't pause, what could happen. And I think a lot of people find themselves in this situation where, even past clients, we've talked to them, they're afraid of what would happen if they would continue down this avenue. And I don't want people to be afraid of their parts, but I want them to make space for their parts so that they can feel like they can have more control and understanding of that part, so that that part can get love. Because at the end of the day, when that part is triggered and activated, is as a result from not being loved, heard, or seen, or valued in a memory and experience. So anyways, bringing it back to step number 3, the final step. which is give reassurance or ask for reassurance from your partner. In that moment when I had shared with you, babe, like I'm triggered, I'm noticing myself disassociate from my body. Like I feel like I'm floating away right now, or I'm like slipping, like whatever verbiage I used. And we need to take a pause on this. Like, we're good, babe, and we're going to be okay. But I just need a pause. So expressing those needs, giving either you reassurance or even asking for it, I think maybe might have happened. And that step number 3 can really help you as a team feel like you're on the same page. Instead of you just getting triggered, you not giving any identity to your part, so it not feeling, again, heard, loved, seen, and understood. And it just kind of like Alan's analogy of the dog with the white linens on that picnic, just shaking off its mud because you don't really know what's going on. You're under so much pressure, you're under so much stress, and you don't know what's bubbling up inside of you. And it just getting all over your partner.
And then you look around and you go, oh crap. Once you are done with all the mud and you're dry now you look around and look at the devastation around you of like, look at what happened, right? Yeah. And so if you've ever experienced a time where you said something or did something and you're like, I can't believe I said that, I can't believe I did that, I can't believe I ran away, or I can't believe I screamed or I yelled or whatever it is, then it creates shame. And then shame actually makes that part go even deeper down, and it becomes this really negative cycle. Yeah. And so the very last thing I want to say before we go here is every single response that you get from your partner or from anyone for that matter is either these two things. I heard this from Tony Robbins once. I'm really, really grateful that I took this training. It's every response you get from someone is either a loving response or some form of a cry for help. And you have to understand when your partner's crying for help, because underneath a cry for help, whether it's in the form of anger or frustration, always underneath it is hurt. Mm-hmm. Someone who's hurt, someone who's unseen, someone who was unloved, someone who was, there's some form of trauma or shame or was mistreated. There's some sort of injustice underneath that, even if we don't know it. And so when someone seems frustrated or angry, we're not always quick to say, oh, deep down, she's just hurt or unseen or unheard. Let me try to understand what she's going through or what he's going through, and let me try to be there for this person, rather than instead a cry for help. Oh, now I'm going to cry for help too. And then it's a cry for help, and then no one gets helped.
You did a really good job in that moment of like, you could have internalized what I said and my hurting as that could have hurt you. But I'm really grateful for you having the awareness in that capacity to know that like, I just needed you in that moment to be able to help me just pause.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of partners struggle to have that reassurance that their partners will hold that space too.
Well, you've done the same for me, love, really. And it's been very wonderful. And I'm grateful that we never kept escalating. And I'm very grateful to say that we've never done that. We've never escalated. We always dissipated early. Yeah. And we noticed when the pressure cooker was getting too much pressure. Yeah. And in past partnerships and relationships, that was not the case. And so Emilia and I are just as guilty, for lack of better phrasing, of blowing our lid at times in the past. And I'm grateful that I made those mistakes prior to meeting you. Same. But now we have these tools. And thanks to you, love, we have these tools. So the 3 steps, let's go through them real quick, and then we'll go.
Real quick. Number 1, name your unloved parts and recognize when they're taking the wheel. Number 2, express your needs. So love on that part by expressing those needs. And number 3, give reassurance to yourself and or ask for that from your partner. You would not let a drunk driver, hopefully, drive you in a car. So do not let your unloved part drive the car when honestly, they just need to take a back seat or they need to be in the passenger side.
Yep. And wait for them to sober up and then let them drive.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we go here, thank you so much for that, sweetheart. This has been a really good episode. One of the best we've ever done thus far, but the best is yet to come. So every single Saturday, we call it Service Saturday. It's actually Saturday when we're recording this right now. We do a relationship talks. We had one earlier.
Awesome.
And we do a free relationship talks every single Saturday, only one per week, but for our listeners. If you're a listener of this show and you've been fascinated or intrigued or you've learned a lot, come join us. We would love to meet you. And we would love to talk all things relationships. So book on our calendar. The link is in the show notes. We do not bite. They are completely private. They are completely anonymous. Join us. We would love to meet you.
We would love to meet you. The second invite that we want to invite you to is to join us in our free live virtual events that we host every second Thursday. But here's the thing. We never do the same topic twice. So this month we are going to be diving into on July 14th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be diving into how to have stress-free travel with your partner. So what this looks like is there's a link in the bio of, I think, you and I's, both of our Instagrams, and then also in the show notes, but you want to check the show notes for that.
Show notes for sure. So
if you have ever struggled with the travel and the stress that comes with this event is going to be so valuable to you because, like, think about having stress-free travel. What would that look like for you? There's going to be other people just like you in that room that are here to learn, that are here to share their experiences. And honestly, like, you can come in, turn your camera off, turn off your mic. Like, we don't force involvement by any means. We just want you to be in the room to be able to extrapolate the value that you need for you and your partner to have just a little bit more stress-free travel than you currently do now.
We've all had that experience where we were so excited for a trip, and then we all had that moment of like humility of just like, oh my God, this is not what I thought it would be.
Why did we do this to
ourselves? Why did we do this to ourselves? And we want to help you not have that moment and actually have these traveling experiences be magnificent, because quite frankly, Emilia and I have done some traveling together and we had those humbling moments and we're like, we're not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to do this and we're going to do this right and we're going to be proactive. So join us. We cannot wait to see you there. As always, it is not about me or you. It's about the we. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia and Alan is a Lazaros 88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.